Amigos, bienvenidos a USA en español, información importante con respecto a las elecciones presidenciales del 3 de noviembre. Quédense hasta el final del video porque el ex alcalde de Nueva York y abogado del presidente Trump ha hecho acusaciones muy fuertes con respecto a lo que ellos han llamado fraude electoral en las elecciones presidenciales de los Estados Unidos. Recuerden, por favor, suscribirse, denle clic al botón de like, enciendan la campanita y compartan estos videos para que todos tengamos la información. Pues comenzamos y les cuento que el ex alcalde de la ciudad de Nueva York, el señor Rudy Giuliani, quien también se desempeña como abogado del presidente Trump y de la campaña republicana, ha reiterado que las elecciones de los Estados Unidos han sido fraudulentas y ha acusado a una empresa de origen venezolano de contar y manipular los votos de las elecciones a lo largo y ancho de todo el país. Son declaraciones muy fuertes, acusaciones de verdad bastante fuertes. Recordemos, el presidente ha disputado las elecciones presidenciales del 3 de noviembre. Han ido a la corte en varios estados para disputar estas elecciones, pero al día de hoy todavía no ha habido ninguna decisión favorable a la campaña del presidente Trump. Les voy a colocar las declaraciones exactas con la traducción de lo que ha dicho Rudy Giuliani con respecto a estas acusaciones de que una empresa de origen venezolano fue la que contó y manipuló los votos en las elecciones del 3 de noviembre. Le coloco las declaraciones completas para que ustedes mismos lo puedan escuchar y, por supuesto, más adelante haré algunos comentarios.
Today, we're going to focus on, for me, one of the biggest surprises that I've had in this case in which I am representing the Trump campaign. And there have been many surprises. But I was absolutely shocked to learn that many, if not all, of our ballots are calculated outside of the United States of America. In the state of Michigan, for example, the state of Arizona, the state of Georgia, the calculations are handled by a company called Dominion. They have the machines. They have a reputation of being, well, I guess the best way to say it is the state of Texas turned them down because they were not considered competent enough to handle elections in Texas. And when I tell you their real history, I think you'll be quite shocked that we used them at all for elections. But in any event, Dominion doesn't really count the votes. Dominion has a contract with a company called Smartmatic. And Smartmatic has locations in Frankfurt, Germany, and in Barcelona, Spain. So when the votes are being calculated, they are sent to, most of them in this particular election, Frankfurt, I believe, but there may have been some sent to Barcelona, Spain. Those votes are also in machines, devices that are extremely vulnerable to hacking and extremely vulnerable to manipulation. Now, let me tell you the history of Smartmatic, because when you hear it, you're not going to believe it, and you're going to have to go check what I say by Googling it if they haven't removed all of this already. Smartmatic is a company whose origins go back to somewhere around 2004, 2005. It was founded by two Venezuelans, and two Venezuelans that were very close to the dictator in Venezuela, Chavez. And it was founded for the specific purpose of being able to fix elections. That's right. The company that is calculating many of our votes in 27 states, the company that's using the software to count those votes, was founded for the specific purpose of fixing elections. If you want to check that out, go online and look at the Sequoia case in Chicago. We'll explain it in a little while. And look at the testimony and the letter from Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who happens to be my representative in Congress, where I live in New York, and her concerns about Smartmatic going back to 2007, 2008, as a Venezuelan company that had a very terrible reputation for fixing elections. Well, they were founded for the specific purpose of making sure that Chavez was elected and reelected, really reelected. and also then used in Argentina at least once or twice in order to make sure that the election was fixed in the way that Chavez wanted it fixed. The place in which this all was exposed was during the 2007 election in Chicago, in which Sequoia, a company named Sequoia, was counting the ballots in Chicago. There was a tremendous amount of confusion. The result of the election was delayed, and there was a great deal of concern with the voting machines. No one really had focused nobody had really focused on where these voting machines had come from. But the voting machines came from and were embedded with software from Smartmatic, again, outside the country. And when they did the investigation, they found this whole history of Smartmatic, that Sequoia was really a front for Smartmatic, the way Dominion is a front for Smartmatic. And Detroit used them in this particular election, for example, and a lot of Michigan used it in this particular election, without apparently taking a look at their history. And their history, right here in the United States, including the election they did in Chicago, is as a company that has been extremely, number one, extremely ineffective, a lot of mistakes, but number two, suspected of directly interfering in elections, because that was the whole purpose for their origin. And that's the company that we used to collect our ballots. Now, how do we find out about this? We found out about it because they apparently made a big mistake. Usually, according to the evidence that we have so far, and I think we're going to have quite a bit more, the way Smartmatic fixes an election is to very subtly change votes. So there isn't some big change in any one particular voting place. So let's say you want to make up 50,000 votes in the city of New York. So you don't do it in one place, you don't do it in two places, three. They use an algorithm in which they spread it out across the city. So they can get you a 2 or 3% difference over your opponent. This is their formula that they use in Venezuela. This is the formula they use in Argentina. This is the formula they're known for. That is executed by the Smartmatic algorithms and the Smartmatic software, which, as I said, originates from Venezuela. In other words, we're using a Venezuelan system to calculate the votes in the United States. We're using a system that originates from a dictatorship, maybe one of the worst in the world, as the core of our vote calculation, and a company whose expertise is subtle changes in votes, so they're not noticed, so there are not too many anomalies in the vote return. Now, of course, like anything else, Smartmatic and Dominion are not perfect, and they weren't perfect in Antrim County, Michigan. In Antrim, all of a sudden, on election day, or when the returns came in from the machine, Biden was ahead. It made no sense because all the Republicans down-ticketed won, and Trump had won that county, I've forgotten by what percentage, but a very large percentage in 2016. And he won the counties around it, similar places around it by big margins. Well, it turned out that, among other things, in one particular machine, they had switched, Dominion had, and Smartmatic, which is the ultimate software, had switched 6,000 votes. It switched 6,000 votes from Trump to Biden. So the poor people of Michigan that went in to vote for Trump ended up voting for Biden because the machine and the software that originates, with Venezuela, the dictatorship, changed their vote without their ever knowing it. Now, had they not been so piggish in that county, we never would have caught them. If it had been a difference of 2,000, 1,200, it had been hard to catch. And that's what they usually do because they're very smart and very crafty. So now we're looking for anomalous results in other parts of the country. We have some very, very good leads where they've changed votes. We're probably not going to get too many because they do it in a way that's very, very careful. But one of the other things they do is they warn you when you're falling too far behind when the count is going on. So I don't know if you remember this, but on election night, there was a period of time in which it looked like Trump was going to win by an unexpectedly large margin. He was ahead in he was ahead in Pennsylvania by between 700,000 and 800,000 votes, with 65% of the vote cast. Normally, when we used to have a fair and decent media, that would have been called for him, because they weren't going to call anything for him until they called enough for Biden, rightly or wrongly, that would make him the winner. Like they get to decide who wins. Somebody should remind them it's the Electoral College that decides who wins, not NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, or any of the rest of them. But in any event, they didn't call it for Trump, even though normally that would be called for someone with a 700,000 to 800,000 lead. Also, he had a very, very substantial lead in Wisconsin. I think it was 9%, something like 85% of the vote cast. He had a 300,000 vote lead in Michigan, again with 85% of the vote cast. He had 2.5% lead in Georgia and North Carolina. Now, that isn't as great, but we were at 90%, and it's usually, I remember when I won the mayoralty, I was at 2.5% with 85% of the vote cast, and they called the election for me.
Amigos, pues esas fueron parte de las palabras del abogado del presidente Trump, el ex alcalde de Nueva York, el señor Rudy Giuliani, quien ha estado al frente de estas disputas legales por las elecciones del 3 de noviembre. Por supuesto, yo no voy a emitir juicio acerca de lo que él ha dicho. Yo supongo que todo esto que él ha dicho va a tener que entregar pruebas en la corte para que sean las cortes las que decidan y tomen la decisión adecuada de qué fue lo que pasó realmente el 3 de noviembre y quién fue realmente el ganador de las elecciones presidenciales en nuestro país. Muchas gracias a todos. Recuerden, por favor, suscribirse al canal, denle clic al botón de like, enciendan la campanita y compartan estos videos para que todos tengamos la información. Muchas gracias a todos y hasta una próxima oportunidad.